Hey everyone, I'm Braulio Rosa, Executive Director of the Broward County Bar Association, and we are doing our podcast again here, the Broward Bar Buzz. I have John Uustal with me from Kelly Uustal, and today our topic is pedestrians and bicyclists and when they get hit by cars, how that's different and unique. John, welcome.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Wonderful. So can you talk a little bit about that, how these cases are different and unique?
Yeah, sure. It hit me, I don't know, I'm getting old, so it was probably a while ago now, but that these cases are different. We had a bunch of them, and I found out in one case that some of the most dangerous intersections in the world are in South Florida, right here in Broward County. In fact, one of my clients, after the case was over, it was a death case, but the surviving partner worked to get the intersection made safer. I wish that's what would happen. We take, the knowledge that we have to get to safer intersections, especially eliminate the most dangerous ones. But if there is a case where a pedestrian or a bicyclist gets hit by a car, it started to occur to me after doing a number of them that we were handling them differently, and we had to handle them differently because for many reasons, they're just not the same as two cars hitting each other.
Well, I mean, there's the obvious, right? There's a person or a car, but can you maybe drill down on that a little bit and tell us how they're different?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, first of all, the mechanisms or injury are not, there's no crush zone inside the car. There's no, soft materials that have been specially designed with a crash in mind, like the interior of a car and potentially seatbelts, airbags, all that. Obviously, you have none of that, and you have, even in low-speed impacts, a direct impact on the body of a human being. So the damage can be catastrophic even at low speeds. Medically, sometimes the person gets hit, maybe a bicyclist gets hit low, and so it appears there's a relatively minor, because it was a very, very low speed to have a minor leg injury. But then there could be easily a head injury because just falling that far, or even a pedestrian who falls and hits the ground, you can crack your skull just falling. So, there's medical differences. There's differences in how you look at insurance coverage. I don't want to get into too many details on that, but, there's different coverages that may be available for pedestrians. I think the biggest thing is in trial, if the cases go to trial. I think that they're more likely to go to trial because, for whatever reason, in my experience, insurance companies underestimate the value of those cases.
Really?
Yeah.
A human being hit is undervalued.
Yeah.
That's god awful.
I'd say most of those cases we end up trying. It's just a difference in valuation. Insurance companies are always trying to figure out what they think the value of a case are, and there's nothing wrong with that, but sometimes there's differences of opinion, and often those are the ones that go to trial. So, and I think they have to be tried differently. It's really, especially if you have a practice handling car crashes, a lot of things tend to be the same. But let me give you one example. We tried a case with a pedestrian, and a key issue was how fast the pedestrian was going. Because if the pedestrian was going fast enough, then the pedestrian went out into the road after the truck had started to turn, right? So if the pedestrian comes out into the road, into the path of an oncoming car, that would be the pedestrian's fault. But knowing where the impact was and where the sidewalk was, there's a certain amount of distance, and knowing how long it would take the truck to travel from the stop sign to where it was, the pedestrian either had to have been already in the road when the truck left the stop sign and then ran over the pedestrian, or, as the defendant said, the pedestrian darted out into the road, but walked. right? Every witness said it was walking. So the defense expert had to provide a number, right, feet per second. So how do you show that the pedestrian wasn't walking that many feet per second? I wish I could give you the exact number. I don't remember it right now, but whatever it was, 4 feet per second. I don't remember. So that's not an issue that you normally have when you're talking about two cars. So the way we solved that was we brought a treadmill in, we switched feet per second to miles per hour, and then I just kept increasing the treadmill as I was cross-examining that accident reconstructionist till I got the speed that he said this pedestrian was walking. And by then I was running. I had to be running. There's no way this pedestrian was walking at that speed.
Wait, and you're doing this in front of the jury?
In front of the jury, right? That case was over, right? He obviously, but once you figure out how to show it, visualize it, prove it to the jury, the truck had left the stop sign after the pedestrian was in the road. That's the only way the pedestrian could be there. He wasn't running. Everyone said he was walking, so there's no way he could have covered enough ground. So I hope I did a good job of explaining that without the whole context of a case. But that's a good example of why, especially when you get to trial, it's different issues than car crash lawyers are used to dealing with.
Right. Well, you had mentioned that and you didn't want to touch, but we should touch a little bit on insurance and coverage. And so more often than not, or often enough, there's no insurance or it's, low coverage. How do you deal with that?
Well, so sometimes pedestrians have their own coverage that covers them even though they're not in a vehicle, right? So you have to look at that. And then there's coverage too for potentially in their household, other people they live with, things like that. So sometimes you can find coverage, uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage for pedestrians that are independent of the vehicle, any vehicle that they would be driving in. Okay. There's different insurance issues sometimes because the pedestrian's not in a vehicle, but it doesn't mean there's not insurance. And certainly, the defendant driver may have insurance, but that's always, that's the same as in a car crash, regular car crash.
So that was, I gotta be honest, that was pretty cool and fascinating, that case where you brought in the treadmill. Do you have any other examples of how you found it to be different sometimes with these kind of accidents? Because that was fascinating to hear about what you did.
Well, one case, it had to do with the speed of the vehicle and how fast the vehicle could go. And their expert tested the vehicle at maximum speed to say, look, even if the driver floored it, he could only go this distance in that amount of time. And basically saying it was a slow vehicle. But right before trial, the vehicle had been sold soon after the crash, but we were allowed to examine it before it was sold. But going through the photos, I noticed that there were 2 exhaust pipes, not one, and that vehicle only has 1. So we scrambled around to find out where the vehicle was. It was somewhere in the Midwest. We flew out there, paid the new owner some amount of money to examine it, and there was all kinds of aftermarket speed modifications to that vehicle, right? So the expert didn't know it, but his whole testimony was a lie. Well, it's hard to win when your main expert's testimony is a lie, so we won that case.
Wow. And of course, the people weren't going to tell you that they tricked out the car. Right.
that and I would have never thought to ask. It's not a normal question, but just luckily I said, wait, there's 2. We used to call them mufflers, but I guess they don't call them mufflers anymore. I'm like, there's 2 mufflers on that car. Why?
I don't know.
Well, it was because of the speed modifications. They required there was all sorts of changes made so that vehicle could go way quicker.
So John, talk about how you've said that sometimes these cases are product liability cases in disguise.
Yeah, so a helmet could be defective in a bicycle case. You got to look at if there's a serious head injury, whether how the helmet performed. We've handled some helmet cases where there was clear liability. You know, there was a lot of times it's not clear. You know, maybe the helmet comes off. Was it properly latched or properly tight enough?
Right.
Or was there a defect in the mechanism? But sometimes it's clear. I had one case where there was a higher level of protection, and it was advertised as having that higher level of protection, and that's why he was a really serious biker, and so he picked that specific helmet and for the higher level of protection, but it didn't have the higher level of protection. So that was a kind of clear liability.
So how do you go about proving that? And I know you've got your mad scientists working with you, like when we discussed the pots that would blow up. But how would you figure out that the helmet isn't up to the rating that it's supposed to be?
So in that case, and I'm embarrassed to say this because it's not usually the case, the expert we hired told us. Okay, so I missed that in that case, but we hired a good expert, and he said, this is advertised as meeting the Snell standard, but Snell publishes the helmets that meet their standard because has to be tested by Snell.
Right.
And they never tested this one, and it doesn't meet the standard. Okay. A lot of times, like that pressure cooker case we've talked about before, the experts didn't find the defect. We had to find it.
Right.
But this case, it's a good guy, smart guy, and he found it. I missed it.
Yeah. What about bicycles? Sometimes they could be defective. The tires, the rims. I don't know.
Yeah, that's always possible. It's more common with motorcycles or dirt bikes where there's sometimes a manufacturing defect or a bad repair, and so you get acceleration where you don't intend it. We've had that case. Brakes, the brakes fail. The brakes fail on a bicycle. It can be just as catastrophic, because you can end up going head through a stop sign. There's the great thing about the job of a lawyer who prosecutes cases, and I've worked in criminal, just in law school as a certified legal intern, so I tried a few criminal cases, but I really don't know. But I think it's similar too in criminal, the prosecution of a case, the genesis of a case, the construction of a case, if you understand what I mean by that, not in any negative way, but what evidence will I show the jury, right? Out of a million things that I could show, what are the pieces of evidence that I will show the jury? And maybe it's the same on the other side too, that the defense attorney has to decide what evidence to show the jury. That's the construction of a case. And so, but when you're investigating early on, we get to say, hey, did we look at this? Should we look at this? A lot of times the intersection is, there's something that makes the intersection really dangerous. There's no lawsuit there, but still we can, like we did with one of my clients, lobby to get the intersection changed, and that's important too. It saves future people from getting hurt. But you get to say, I want to look at the how the bicycle was designed, or the helmet, or the roadway, and it's exciting. It's intriguing.
Would you use Google Maps for that?
I told you about a case where there was a road construction case, and there was a cover-up, and the photos that we had been supplied, the sidewalk should have been closed, and the photos supplied by the construction company showed the sidewalk. There was a sign right in the right place blocking the sidewalk and closing it. But Google Maps, that car you see going around, had gone by that morning, just out of pure luck. And we had the real photos from Google Maps, and it was actually confirmed because a government entity had been submitted the actual photos, because they take them regularly and submit them. So we were able to confirm it, but we figured it out with Google Maps. That sidewalk was not closed. It was required to be closed. It was a clear defect, and the defendant had tried to cover it up. Not defect, clear negligence, clear violation of the maintenance of traffic plan.
I mean, silly question, but for people watching that aren't lawyers, so these people clearly were covering up and lying. Is there any ramification for that when, other than they lose the case?
Rarely. I had the first case I ever tried. There was a big thing. It ended up being on 60 Minutes, and there were news cameras in the whole time because some key evidence came out that suggested that engineers for a car company, and potentially with the involvement of their lawyers, had been testifying falsely, inaccurately. And so 3 judges end up looking into it after key documents came out in our case. This was one of the best moments ever in my life as a trial lawyer. The judge, it was Judge Franza, he's passed now, but he got the document that the car company wanted to keep secret, and he had to threaten to put people in jail. They refused to give it to him. He's like, I'm the judge. Okay, people are going to jail if I don't get it. So he gets it, he looks at it, and then he says to the car company lawyer, he says, what am I supposed to do? Just sweep it under the rug? And the car company lawyer said, yeah, Your Honor, that's the law, because they said it was attorney-client privilege. So he said, yeah, that's the law. Just sweep it under the rug. And the judge says, some of us still believe what's written on the courtroom wall. So we had been in trial like 4 months at that point. It was a long trial, 6-month trial. So everyone's like, wow, you go in every day, you forget, you don't see anymore. What is written on the courtroom wall? And it said, and I recently found out this is only written in courtrooms in Miami and Fort Lauderdale. And I'm not sure why, but it said, we who labor here seek only truth. And so he let the documents out. It was 60 Minutes. Wow. And then after the case, there was investigations, and there was some penalty that the car company had to pay, especially in a case in Georgia, Judge Gino Brogdon in Georgia. So anyway, sometimes.
And the lawyers, they got away with it because it's client-attorney privilege, basically.
In that particular case, the Judge Brogdon gave, so Judge Franza and Judge Stevens in Missouri were also looking into whether there should be punishment of the lawyers. Judge Franza and Judge Stevens both died before they completed the investigation. Judge Brogdon did, and what he eventually said was the witness was testifying falsely, differently than what the witness had told the lawyers the truth was. But how do I prove that the lawyers knew, he was lying rather than he'd had a stroke, or he just, he could have had a memory failure that was not lying, theoretically.
Theoretically.
Yeah, so he said, how do you prove that? But if you can't, you'll never have proof. I mean, you'll never have a video of a lawyer saying to a witness, well, how about you say it this way, which is the false way? That's unethical for any young lawyers who watch TV and don't realize that. Like, you don't get to tell a witness to say something that's not true. You should lose your license, in my opinion, if you do that. But it's very rare that a lawyer is ever caught. And, potentially it's also true that a lawyer stumbles into a situation where a witness is lying and they don't know it. So,
sure.
You don't want to punish lawyers when they didn't do anything wrong.
No, absolutely not. But that didn't sound like it.
Yeah.
From what you told me.
No comment.
John, any final thoughts on pedestrians and bicyclists being hit in car accidents?
Be creative. These case, every case we get to work on as lawyers is a privilege, and being creative is, an exciting part of the job.
Thank you for coming, my friend. I appreciate it. This was a great conversation, by the way.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Everyone, thank you for being with us, and join us again when I speak with John and other guests throughout the year. Have a good one. That was good stuff we were just talking about back in the day, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. I could see young Braulio driving around his Mustang 5.0, 5 liters. That's what that means. That was a lot back then.
Back then
That
it was
a
a lot.
Yeah.
That was a
Big
fast
engine.
car.